episode 217 of the CRICKETher Weekly. We've made it, Sid. We're in God's own county, Yorkshire. Here we are, Headingley, and we're ready for the third England v Pakistan T20 International. There's been a lot of cricket happening this week in England. The Charlotte Edwards Cup got underway yesterday with just one round that's been played so far. The rest of the round is being played today, I believe. Sorry about Southern Vipers, Sid.
It happens.
So, technically speaking, the Blaze are now top of the table. The Charlotte Edwards Cup. So that was a bit of a crazy final over showdown over at the Utility Bowl. I got it right.
You did, yeah. It was a pretty close game, and there were 3 runs in the end. Vipers really suffered because of a silly run out from Freya Kemp, didn't they? That Freya Kemp, it's that kind of youthful exuberance thing, unfortunately, that came into play there. Went for a run that wasn't there, ended up run out. I think they'd have won if she'd been there, but hey ho, these things happen.
It's not hey ho, it's the Charlotte Edwards Cup, so. Anyway, England v Pakistan. So we were obviously at Northampton on Friday for the second T20 International. England won by 65 runs, which as a scoreline probably slightly flatters England again, perhaps in a similar way to the first T20, which we talked about last week. What do you think, Sid?
Well, I think overall the theme of these first 2 games has been that Pakistan have been really, really bad. And it's hard to see how England could have contrived to lose to them. I mean, we see they recovered from a position of 11 for 4 last time. This time they didn't get off to quite such a bad start, but they didn't get off to a great start really. They had what looks on paper to be a decent power play, but it was all like 20 runs off 1 over when Alice Capsey hit 5 fours. I mean, it was like one of the worst 20 run overs I've ever seen. And they didn't make as many runs in the end as they did in the first T20, but Pakistan just collapsed horrendously, even worse. Well, they lose 5 for 7 or something?
5 for 8.
Thanks, Raf. If they're going to do that, then England are going to carry on winning these games by big margins. But England shouldn't get too excited about this, right?
Yeah, exactly. It feels like in many ways it's not a great kind of warm-up series for the World Cup. Obviously England are also playing New Zealand between now and then. Potentially some of them may play Ireland, although not many. So actually in terms of a build-up to the World Cup, it's probably not the best few months. It feels like yet again today we're likely to see a one-sided game. Don't know what we're going to see in the ODIs, but possibly more of the same, because the real issue is the kind of weakness of the Pakistan batting lineup, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean they just managed to just they've got some shots, they've got some players that have got some shots, but they seem incapable of holding back at all. They're just getting. I mean, they took 7 catches, 7 outfield catches went to England on Friday evening, and that's kind of symbolises the way that Pakistan's approach to batting, which is just like close your eyes and hit it, mostly straight up in the air. There's been quite a lot of talk in the press about England's bowlers and how England's bowlers have been magnificent, because if you look at the scorecard, it looks like that, but I'm really not convinced that that's actually been the case. I mean, they've been bad. But Alice Capsey got the Player of the Match award, partly as a result of the 2 wickets that she got, but the 2 wickets were, both as a result of catches. And I think that we're kind of overestimating the bowlers a bit. I'm interested. I've been reading a bit about a metric they have in baseball where they look at fielding independent pitching stats. So the pitcher, the bowler, they look at how the pitcher performs on plays where the fielders are not involved. And they almost say in baseball, if someone catches it in the outfield, that's not down to the pitcher. That's down to either a poor shot from the batter or a good fielding catch from the fielder. But the bowler doesn't get those numbers in some of these stats. And it feels like, we need to kind of consider a little bit that the fielders are doing all the work here. Right? We saw some great catches. We saw a great catch from Danny Wyatt, and we saw a great catch from Danny Gibson. So fantastic stuff. But it sort of feels like by crediting the bowlers for these, we're kind of playing up the wrong people here.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, very interesting baseball comparison, thanks for that. I mean, actually bringing Alice Capsey onto bowl in itself is a sign of where England were in the game at that point, right? Pakistan were already 6 down, they were nothing like keeping up with the run rate, so Heather Knight just thought, okay, well, I'll chuck in Capsy because it's possible she may occasionally have to turn her arm over during the World Cup if one of our spinners gets injured and we need some extra spin bowling. So this is a great opportunity to chuck her in when it doesn't really matter. And as it happens, she took 2 wickets. Everyone's great. I said to Sophie Eccleston in the press conference, "Are you concerned that Alice Capsey's coming for your record?" Which is obviously a stupid joke. Fortunately, Eccleston saw the funny side and laughed, and great. But that was a sign of kind of where we were in the match. And yeah, when you're taking wickets like that on that kind of occasion, we can't then really get a proper measure for where our bowling lineup is at again, and is going to perform against sides like Australia, India, even South Africa in the World Cup in Bangladesh. We just can't. There's just not very much meaningful that you can probably take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to talk briefly about Alice Capsey as well, because she did get Player of the Match award. She did join top scorer along with Nat Siva, but you know, the 5 fours in and over were not terribly convincing. And overall, her last 18 balls that she faced, she only scored 9 runs. And she actually said in the presser afterwards, "Oh, I felt much better as the innings went on." And I'm like, were you playing the same innings I was watching? And I do think that, you know, we're still waiting for that big innings and we're waiting for that big contribution.
Yeah.
I actually noticed a really interesting stat that her T20 batting average for England is only barely above Charlie Dean's, and her strike rate is only barely above Charlie Dean's. It shouldn't be. Alex Capsey's strike rate and average should be way up ahead of Charlie Dean's. So, you know, we're still looking for her to kick on and, you know, make that kind of step up in her career that's going to turn her into the best player in the world, which I still believe that she has the potential to be.
Yeah, and actually on that theme of kind of potential, there was a really interesting comment underneath your piece from Friday on the site, basically kind of saying, to what extent are England picking on potential rather than on actual performance? And it's a really interesting one because you know, when Capsey was picked, we felt it was very much based on actual kind of technique and skill. So I probably wouldn't say that they're picking her on potential at the moment. But let's talk about like Bess Heath, for example. They certainly are picking her based on potential rather than who is the actual second best wicketkeeper in England after Amy Jones, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, Bess Heath, you know, she does have a lot of potential, but, you know, is Bess Heath even the best wicketkeeper in Yorkshire, to kind of roll that old Beatles thing about whether Ringo was the best drummer in the Beatles? Is Bess Heath the best wicketkeeper in Yorkshire? No. Is Bess Heath the best wicketkeeper batter in Yorkshire? No. Is she the only one that might be in 10 years' time when Lauren Winfield-Hill has long retired? Well, yes, and that's why she's in the squad. We think there's a chance she might play today. She's definitely been warming up with the gloves before games, so they're definitely, you know, trying to make sure that she's ready for that role.
It would make sense for her to play today because there's that nice kind of home crowd element to it, and also because they've won the series and she'll get some actual T20 match practice ahead of being definitely the reserve wicketkeeper in the World Cup, which John Lewis has said she's definitely going to be. Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, it will be nice to see her play today. Yeah. But yeah, and you know, so Freya Kemp's another one that's essentially. I mean, Freya Kemp has been picked for this series on her potential as an all-rounder, despite the fact that she's not bowling. I mean, you know, she's a decent batter and she can whack a ball, and she does have a 50 for England. I think she make it, was it like a 49 that she made in one of the games last year? But she's had one decent score for England. She's a reasonable number of decent scores for Vipers. But essentially, again, being picked on potential. So. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I kind of feel that England are very constricted, we talked about this before, by the fact that they've got this group of contracted players and they're really reluctant to look outside that group of contracted players. Holly Armitage did get that cap in New Zealand, you know, after coming on as a concussion substitute, but it's really rare that they're actually, you know, looking outside that group. They're choosing the group of contracted players and then choosing their England team from within that group. And, you know, that means that they're not picking on who's performing right now, you know, in actual cricket games. They're very much looking at, you know, who can we pick that's, I mean, to be fair, we've asked them to pick on potential. We've asked them to kind of back people, you know, in the past. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But, you know, at the moment, you know, it's about getting a balance, I guess. Yeah. And maybe, you know, there's a little bit of a balance where we're not quite sure who those next players are going to be. We've kind of put our chips on some of them and gone, okay, we're going to pick them, and you know, maybe we need to look a little bit wider.
Yeah, and you can understand that there's potentially some frustration if you aren't one of those kind of chosen few, right? But yet you're continually putting in performances in domestic cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, even if you're Lauren Winfield Hill, you're possibly looking at it going, well, actually, if England were to pick, you know, the second best wicketkeeper batter in England, hello, you know, Ellie Threlkeld might also have a claim to that,
Exactly.
you know, on the right nows.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If you're picking somebody just because you need a reserve wicketkeeper for Amy Jones, then you potentially wouldn't pick Bess Heath. Anyway, be very interesting to see what happens today at Headingley. Will be great to see Bess Heath get a game, as we've said. Can't really see any other result other than England winning this one.
Yeah.
But you know, it's cricket. Let's move on to our second topic, Sid, because the ECB held their annual general meeting this week in Cardiff. And there was some nice photos on social media. There was a lovely accompanying press release that actually said that the ECB past year has had some record-breaking financial results. That was a direct quote. Profit has reached 27.9 million, up from 21.1 million the year before. Absolutely staggering numbers when you think about it. My immediate response to seeing this press release was to sort of scratch my head and go, okay, well, why do they need to sell the 100 then? Because in last week's episode we did talk about this, didn't we? And we talked about our concerns about selling off the 100, that you're essentially kind of selling off the jewel of the summer, that nice summer holiday August period. And yet the ECB's message there seems to be we need the money, whilst simultaneously releasing a press release suggesting that they've got millions and millions and squillions in the bank and everything's very nice financially in terms of English cricket. Now both of those things cannot be true.
Yeah, it does feel like we veer wildly between the ECB telling us one week, oh, we're as poor as church mice, we've not got 2 farthings to rub together, it's all terribly difficult, and then a week later going, we're absolutely rolling in money, we've got millions and millions of it. And the cynic in me just wonders if it's executive bonus time. Executive bonus time, we've got millions, we're rolling in money. 6 weeks later, it's the employee bonus time. Oh, I'm sorry, chaps, there's just nothing there. The cupboard is dry.
We are obviously speculating here, just have to say that for legal reasons, but you know, this was in the news a few years ago because I can remember being at the Cricket Writers Club annual lunch. It was the first one back after COVID, so I think that would have been 2021, and George DeBell was the chair then, and he was stood at the front and he said it's so lovely to see some kind of top executives from the ECB here today. It really is a huge bonus to have them here, and it was obviously a joke playing off this idea of or the fact that it had been in the news that the top execs then had paid themselves quite a substantial amount of money. Yes, so I mean, I did pose this question on social media, had any number of answers from people varying from just kind of people saying it's greed to other people saying, well, it's about the state of the county finances rather than the ECB's finances, which I guess kind of makes sense, but then it's all English cricket, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, I think that you have to kind of look at it more holistically as one pot, because the counties are, I mean, everybody knows that the counties, all but one of the counties, is essentially dependent upon the ECB's annual stipend in order to get anywhere close to profitability. Only Surrey make a profit without the annual stipend. And so, you know, the ECB do have money, but, you know, why do they want to sell the 100 then? Well, because they want a
More
huge
money.
amount of cash to come into the game. What's going to happen to that huge amount of cash when it comes into the game? Well, we're going to see, but I'll tell you what usually happens when a huge amount of cash comes into sports. People's salaries get massively inflated, particularly the top male players, who are the ones that are really in demand, and that money, you know, is blown in a few years. And then what are we going to do? We're going to create the 200 and try and sell that to the IPL owners, and then a few years later the 300. Who knows?
Anyway, finally this week, talking about new competitions, there's been a resolution of sorts over in Australia after we previously talked about the controversy over the sort of shortening of the WBBL and in its place Cricket Australia coming up with this new domestic kind of state T20 competition. Now, New South Wales and Victoria had both kicked up a bit of a stink about this, saying we want 2 teams because we've got 2 teams in the WBBL, so we're going to have 2 teams in this new competition, and if you don't give us 2 teams, we're going to boycott your new competition. We're just going to play each other. Very interesting. So, what's happened, Sid?
Well, ultimately, Cricket Australia folded. The threat worked. So they've concluded that they are going to have these additional teams. So New South Wales and Victoria are going to have 2 teams in the new state T20 competition. This is obviously a last-minute decision. I'm not sure they've really thought about the consequences at all of this. So there's a couple of interesting things. The first is it's just interesting to think about where power dynamics lie in Australian cricket, because we tend to think in this country that the ECB are very powerful, and we kind of translate that to the Australian situation and assume that Cricket Australia are very powerful, but they've been totally rolled over by New South Wales and Victoria ganging up on them, and they obviously didn't feel that they could compete. They obviously felt that the threat was realistic to go it alone, and that would essentially kill their new T20 competition stone dead. So that was interesting. And then the other thing is how is this actually going to look? Are we going to have, what are those 2 teams going to be? Are there going to be an A team and a B team from New South Wales? Are we going to have New South Wales Thunder and New South Wales Sixers? And similar in Victoria Renegades and Victoria whatever they are. So I'm drawing a blank. How's that going to work? Yeah. And that is going to be very interesting from a question of marketing
Victoria
and things.
Stars.
Thank you. That's going to be very interesting in terms of how they market it, because Cricket Australia have generally treated their state competitions, to be fair, they'll do this in the men's game as well. They treat their state competitions as very much sort of development competitions that they don't particularly make an effort to market. And yet, if you've effectively got the WBBL teams competing in this thing, then maybe they've got an interest in marketing them and trying to get people through the gates to see the New South Wales Thunder against the New South Wales Sixers. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out, and whether Cricket Australia, whether they allow them to do that. On the other hand, it looks like from what we've seen that if they want to do it, that's what they'll do, because they have the power.
Well, those 2 states are particularly powerful in terms of the concentration of many of the best kind of female cricketers, right, are very, very, for whatever reason, are very, very concentrated in those 2 states. So I guess that's what gives them a certain amount of power. You might feel, though, if you're in a different state, a little bit disgruntled perhaps by this state of affairs. You're effectively going to be playing
state of affairs.
Oh, thanks. That wasn't even deliberate. You're effectively going to have to play these teams twice now. It's a bit like we have a competition called University Challenge in this country. No idea if any other countries have this. It's a quiz team, and teams from universities compete, right? And the Oxbridge, so Oxford and Cambridge, individual colleges get to compete. So people say that's not fair, because they've got a much larger shot, therefore, of winning the whole competition, whereas your other universities have only got 1 team in the whole competition. So you can understand that some of the other states might be a little bit disgruntled about this potentially. For me, the whole thing just feels like a huge kind of waste of everybody's time, because what we've effectively ended up with is the WBBL Mark II. As you said, it could end up with the same team names competing. We're going to have, it's not a state competition because those 2 states have got 2 teams now, so it effectively is the WBBL, but it's just they've got to go about setting up new branding, give it a new name, come up with a new trophy, all of those things, all of that hard work that goes into developing a new competition from scratch. And oh my goodness, what a faff. Why not just stick with the thing that you already had that was working quite well? Yeah,
and also all so that a handful of top players can play a few less games.
Yeah. Cool, well, that's all from us this week. We're going to dash on up to the press box, get this uploaded hopefully before the 3rd T20 takes place. We hope you enjoy if you're watching, and we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the CRICKETher Weekly. Bye for now.
Bye.